Yo, 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 what is good, party people, and all my wrestling fans across the world? Welcome to a brand new week, and welcome to a special wrestling review rewind edition of what we like to call the Clash of Champions, where we dive headfirst into all the controversy, storylines, personalities, and all that shit in between that center around this world we know and love as professional wrestling, for better or worse. I am your host, the vegan you believe in, Conscious Kurt, aka Kurt GPT, the moral conscience of America in the flesh as always. And this week is a special episode as we'll be doing our wrestling review rewind covering WrestleMania 10. And I can't wait to dive into that special show later on because those were my early memories of being a wrestling fan. But before we dive into all that, we got to get into the current state of this world of professional wrestling. And we're going to start off with the build to WrestleMania 42, which is coming up in 1 month from today, actually. And the road to WrestleMania was spiced up in a major way this past Friday night on SmackDown as we had the contract signing for the WWE Championship match between the champion Cody Rhodes and Randy Orton. And they have the contract signing. The two of them are kind of going back to their history. Cody mentions how his first opponent in WWE when he first came to the company was Randy Orton, how they were in Legacy together, how they go way back, and all that good stuff. It's all a whole buddy thing for the most part, up until Randy Orton signs the contract himself. Immediately after Randy Orton signs the contract, he shakes Cody's hand, he gives him a hug, and then he slams his head into the damn table and then hits him with a low blow. And obviously, knowing Randy Orton's dark side, he was not done here. He proceeded to rip Cody's shirt off, beat the hell out of him, hit him in the head with the steel steps, and bloodied him up in the process. And then he put him in the middle of the steel steps and laid him on top of the announce table. And Nick Aldis is trying to stop him, and he shoves Nick Aldis down. Jelly Roll even tries to stop him, and he shoves Jelly Roll down. And he seems like he's leaving. He seems like he's walking away. But then a few seconds later, out of nowhere, he comes from the timekeeper's area with a chair and nails Cody with it while he's pressed back against the steel steps. And that visual of Randy Orton standing over Cody with that steel chair with the WrestleMania sign right behind them, that was priceless. And also another priceless image was the image of Randy Orton sitting in the ring holding the WWE Championship while he's sitting in a chair in his lap. I gotta say, this was one hot angle. It's something SmackDown desperately needed. It's something the road to WrestleMania in many ways desperately needed. And I know some people are kind of upset at the fact that Randy turned here as opposed to waiting until WrestleMania to do the turn. But I feel like this makes the match a lot more exciting and a lot more interesting. There's a lot they can do with the build in the next month if they really play their cards right. And this angle was very well done. It definitely spiced things up. And honestly, me personally, I'm more excited to see this match now than I was 1 week ago. How it will play out in the next month remains to be seen. I could see them doing a similar route to the Randy Orton and Triple H storyline heading into WrestleMania 25. But I will say this was a very well done heel turn, and they have a lot they can do to capitalize on this in the coming weeks. But yeah, well done. I like the angle. It was the best part of SmackDown, which really isn't saying much, but I don't need to dive into that right now. And yeah, it's so crazy. Most of the people that were celebrating in the ring with Cody when he won the championship at WrestleMania 2 years ago, at least 3 of them have already turned on him. Kevin Owens turned on him. Then John Cena turned on him last year, and now Randy Orton turns on him. He better watch his back around Sami Zayn and LA Knight and all those other people because, yeah, it's seeming like this is a damn epidemic up in here. So, yes, Randy Orton is officially a heel. This is the first time he's been a heel in over 5 years. And, yeah, it's crazy. This was the longest babyface run he ever had in his whole career. 5 damn years. I know he was out for one of those years, but still, that's not the point. He's been a babyface for a long damn time. And I think many of us can agree that heel Randy Orton is the best Randy Orton. And I can't wait to see how this plays out going into WrestleMania because it has been a long time coming. So yes, we had that take place on SmackDown, and on Raw this past Monday night, we did have a couple things spice up for WrestleMania. As in the opening segment, Seth Rollins and the mystery dudes in the black hoodies all showed up again, roaming around all over the place, making shit all confusing. And then Rollins talks about how anybody associated with the Vision is going to be taken care of and is going to be targeted on sight, all that good stuff. And then Paul Heyman comes out to confront Rollins looking like he's been through a rough couple weeks, which makes sense considering the attack that Rollins pulled on him a few weeks ago. Yeah, Paul Heyman was looking rough, looking like he was going through a hard time, which makes sense. And then he starts saying F-A-F-O multiple times, and then he ends it the last time by saying F-A, F5. And that brings out none other than Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar comes out, and I kind of called this a few weeks ago because Brock Lesnar is associated with Heyman, and with the attack that Rollins pulled on Heyman and the fact that Rollins has no opponent for WrestleMania, they may go in this direction. And it looked like that at first as Heyman brought out Lesnar, and Lesnar just made easy work of all those black hoodie geeks. He was suplexing them all, throwing them all around. They didn't have a damn chance against him. He fucked them all up on sight. And then it finally came down to Brock Lesnar and Seth Rollins. But before anything could happen, the lights go out, and coming out is none other than Oba Femi. Oba Femi makes his grand entrance to the ring. He confronts Brock Lesnar, and as Brock Lesnar is distracted by Seth Rollins leaving the ring, when he turns around, Oba Femi picks him up for the fall from grace, lifts him up high as a motherfucker in the air, and then just dropped his ass right on the mat and then put his foot on him to signify the fact that he has answered Brock Lesnar's open challenge for WrestleMania, and it is official. Brock Lesnar, Oba Femi, one-on-one at WrestleMania 42. And I have to say, this is also something that the road to WrestleMania 42 needed. Because I remember when they had Brock Lesnar come out for that promo a few weeks ago with Heyman, where they just put out that open challenge and nothing happened. But now, here in this segment, something finally happened, and something happened in a major motherfucking way. So yeah, people were kind of clamoring for this match ever since the Royal Rumble, and now we are finally going to get it. Oba Femi, Brock Lesnar, WrestleMania, and I'm excited for this. I cannot wait for this. Because in all honesty, let's be honest, Brock Lesnar's run ever since he came back at SummerSlam last year has been a disappointment. It has not been very interesting at all, but this is interesting. This is something we can all sink our teeth into. And this is a WrestleMania-worthy match. And I can't wait to see how it plays out in the next month. And I especially cannot wait to see how it plays out on WrestleMania weekend. So we had that. We had AJ Lee in her first defense of her Women's Intercontinental title taking on Bayley. They had a solid match. Match was pretty good, but ultimately, predictably so, AJ retained her championship with the Black Widow, forced Bayley to tap out. They shook hands and hugged afterwards because they're obviously friends. But then after the match, AJ Lee was viciously attacked from behind by the former champion, Becky Lynch. So it kind of happened during the commercial break, as when they came back from the commercial break, Becky was already attacking her. So Becky, beat the hell out of AJ, threw her all over the place, and then proceeded to hit her in the head with the Women's Intercontinental title. So now it looks like we are getting this match again at WrestleMania. Because AJ said that Becky was in the rear view in that promo 2 weeks ago, and we hadn't seen Becky since Elimination Chamber when she lost the title. So it kind of made things look like it was going to be something else at WrestleMania involving the two of them. But from what we saw on Monday, it looks like we are getting the match again. And honestly, I can't really be mad at it, because for the way this whole story has gone, with AJ getting the better of Becky at every turn, with making her tap out at WrestlePalooza, making her tap out at Survivor Series, and then making her tap out and taking her women's IC title at Elimination Chamber on top of that, they need to have at least one more match for Becky to finally get her win back. And it looks like it's finally going to happen at WrestleMania, and hey, I'm cool with it. It's all good. And also, we had another title defense from Penta, as he had his second title defense this week against Dragon Lee. And I gotta say, this was one hell of a match from start to finish. Honestly, bell to bell, this was the highlight of the whole night. And Dragon Lee put the word suicide in Suicide Dive, with the suicide dive he did to Penta during the match that led to Penta falling over the announce table. Yo, that shit was wild, son. That shit was wild. And this entire match as a whole was wild, and it ultimately led to Penta hitting the Mexican Destroyer out of nowhere as he ran across the ropes to take care of Dragon Lee and retain his championship. And yeah, great match between these two. I just am a little concerned, though, as far as what Penta's direction is going to be for WrestleMania, because it's great that he's Intercontinental Champion. I think he's doing a great job with it so far. But with about a month out from WrestleMania, there's no clear direction on who his opponent's going to be, what match he's going to be in, or anything along those lines. I mean, with the Dominic situation and Finn Balor feud and all that, they could maybe do a three-way with them. But honestly, from how that angle went down last week with Dominic and Finn Balor, I think it's best that they do a singles match between the two of them. And as far as Penta goes, I could maybe see him in a match with possibly Gunther. If Gunther doesn't have Rey Mysterio as his opponent, that's been rumored for WrestleMania. If that's not going to go down, they could maybe do Penta and Gunther. That would be great. Also, they could do Penta against LA Knight. They could do something with that too. That would be pretty interesting. And since it doesn't look like Seth Rollins is going against Brock Lesnar anymore, or obviously that's not happening anymore, they could do Penta against Seth Rollins. That would also be a fun match. I mean, but in general, these are just names I'm throwing out. There's no guarantee they're actually going to go in this direction. But with a month until WrestleMania to go, they need to do something. Because, yeah, for him to not have a match on WrestleMania, that would be pretty whack sauce. Major league whack sauce. And also, we had a non-title match between Women's World Champion Stephanie Vaquer and Raquel Rodriguez. Solid match. I mean, we've kind of seen these two wrestle a lot, so it's kind of like no different than the other matches we've seen between them. But as Liv Morgan was attempting to interfere, somebody came out to even the odds, and that person who came out to even the odds was none other than Io Sky. So Io Sky ran after Liv Morgan, kind of trying to keep her from interfering in the match. But during this entire melee, Raquel Rodriguez pushed Io Sky over the announce table. Damn. So that kind of gives us an idea of what match we're going to see at WrestleMania in that department. But ultimately, Raquel was rolled up by Stephanie Vaquer as she attempted the Tejana Bomb, and Stephanie Vaquer picked up the win. No surprise, because she's heading into a major title match with Liv Morgan at WrestleMania. So yeah, that was that. And in the main event segment, we had Roman Reigns show up after not being on the show last week and having his cousins handle his business for him. We had Roman Reigns show up to call out CM Punk, and CM Punk eventually came out. The two of them once again went back and forth with each other. And then CM Punk referred to Roman Reigns, as you know, like a part-timer, and he also asked who the real tribal chief was. And then Roman goes off about how Punk's arguments or Punk's like insults at him aren't original, and how like he just copies off of other people and what other people say about him. And he says, like, until WrestleMania, unless you have something original for me, then I don't want to hear anything else you have to say. And then as Roman is trying to leave, Punk stops him. Roman tries to leave again. Punk stops him that time. And then Punk just basically says, my title, my show, my ring, you leave when I say you can leave. And Roman actually gets back in the ring. And then Punk goes off about how he's going to break Roman's fragile ego in two. He's going to hit him with the go to sleep. He's going to put him to bed and end him at WrestleMania, all that good stuff. And then Roman says in response that having Punk wear that championship is an embarrassment and it's making the entire company look bad, because at the end of the day, in Roman's words, Punk is old. And this set Punk off big time as he knocked down Roman with a right hand, and security had to get in between them and like separate them and break it all up. And that was the end of the show. Of all the things to trigger CM Punk, of all the things he could have said, he even mentioned Punk's wife AJ, mentioning about how the real big money makers know how to be original, and he told him to ask his wife. Punk didn't get mad at that, but Punk got mad when Roman called him old. Damn. Who would have thought that would be the main thing to set him off? But that's what happened in this case. So Punk knocked down Roman with a right hand. And yeah, they kind of rushed to the physicality between the two of them a lot sooner than I thought they would. But I thought it worked here. This is probably the weakest of all the segments they've had between each other since the build for WrestleMania started. But it was still solid nonetheless. It still kind of accomplished what it needed to in progressing the storyline further. So we will see what happens next week on Raw, because Roman is slated to be on Raw for the next 2 weeks going into WrestleMania. So yeah, the road to WrestleMania is slowly picking up a little bit more. It's getting a little bit more interesting than it was a few weeks ago. They're really starting to put their foot on the gas, and hopefully they continue this trend between now and April 18th and 19th. But one person who's really coming off bad lately on social media is Ricochet, AEW's finest. The dude has been kind of doing this ever since he came to AEW, just getting into these petty back and forth arguments with trolls on social media and random people. And yeah, just the way he comes off, yeah, just a bad look. His insults, the things he says, they're not even funny or creative. And just the fact that he's like, wasting his time doing all this stuff, yeah, just kind of hard to like really get behind the dude in a sense. But he took it a step too far just a few days ago, as they posted a video, like a short video on social media the other day of like him having a tantrum after he lost to Jack Perry a few days ago. They posted a video of his tantrum backstage afterwards. And then one person left a comment saying that like his acting is horrible and his acting didn't get any better since he came to AEW. And in response, Ricochet said to this person that he was happy that they had MS. I'm sure many of you know MS is a very serious disease that affects the brain and also the spine, and there's also no cure for it. And I guess Ricochet looked at the person's profile and decided to use that as the comeback to that person. And yeah, he just came off so horrible with that response, and everybody and their mother let him have it, and rightfully so, to the point where he had to take down the tweet, and he even went on to apologize for it. I mean, it's nice that he apologized and all that. That's cool. But yeah, that was too far. That was really a new low for that dude. And from how this all came off, Tony Khan really needs to have a talk with him and like really kind of like let him know that that shit won't be tolerated. That shit is not okay. Because yeah, that was a real low, real despicable move on Ricochet's part. And one thing that's also despicable that I'll get into real fast is that I'm seeing that people are sending death threats and sending all these kind of threats to Ricochet's wife, Samantha Irvin. And I have to say that shit is uncalled for. That shit is messed up. Samantha Irvin had nothing to do with what Ricochet said, and sending that kind of message to her and sending those kind of threats to her is also every bit as fucked up. So if anybody out there listening is doing that shit and, you know, promoting that shit, cut that shit out. I fucking mean it. That shit is messed up. And Ricochet is also messed up for what he said. He deserves to be called out for it. And I'm glad he apologized, but in the future, he needs to calm down with his damn social media interactions because he looks like a fucking idiot with a lot of these reactions. I hate to say it, but it is the truth. And also, speaking of AEW, we did have AEW Revolution take place this past Sunday from Los Angeles, California. And one of the main things coming out of that show that people were talking about was the AEW debut of Rowdy Ronda Rousey, who has a UFC fight coming up in a few months, but she decided to make an appearance at AEW Revolution and confront Timeless Tony Storm. The two of them had a little face-off before they were separated by security and all that. So from the way it's looking now, Ronda Rousey is now a part of AEW. And this has caused a lot of divided opinion where obviously people aren't fans of Ronda Rousey, myself included, for a lot of the things she said about wrestling, a lot of the things she said about other wrestlers, and just the way she comes off in general on social media and interviews. It's kind of hard to be a fan of the woman. But I will admit, getting a name like Ronda Rousey is a big deal in the sense that even if she's, you know, not in her prime anymore, or like not in her prime, like famous years anymore, she still is a big name nonetheless that they could use. And now we're going to see for sure whether maybe it was WWE's fault that her last run went as bad as it did, or if it was just simply her fault that it went as bad as it did. Because if, God forbid, this run ends up going down negatively and she ends up coming off bad and it doesn't end well, you cannot put it on AEW. You cannot put it on anybody else. Yeah, there's no more excuses. And look, personally, I don't really care either way. I've kind of been over Ronda Rousey for years. But if they can make something good out of this, then cool. But I will be honest, I'm not really holding my breath for this whole thing. If it works out, cool. If it doesn't work out, whatever. It is what it is. But we will see how this plays out in the coming weeks. So in any event, also at AEW Revolution, we did have the death match for the AEW World Championship pitting the champion MJF defending against Hangman Adam Page, and these dudes went 45 minutes. And obviously this had everything that an AEW death match would entail, with weapons, even a fucking needle they put into each other's mouths. That shit went down too. I think that shit is a little overkill, but to each his own. And ultimately, to no surprise, MJF retained his championship, and because of that, Hangman Adam Page can no longer challenge for the championship while MJF holds that title. So yeah, people spoke highly of AEW Revolution. There were a lot of good reviews for it. But even if the reviews for it were good, the one constant complaint for their PLEs is that they are too fucking long. I love wrestling as much as the next person, but I will admit the past AEW PLEs I've watched in the past, or I'm sorry, pay-per-views, because they're actually pay-per-views, yeah, they've been stupid long. Because I remember watching AEW All in Texas back in July, and that show was literally 6 hours. After watching that show for 4 hours, I still didn't even get to the main events, and I had to go out and I had to pause it and watch it all the next day. Yeah, that was a long ass weekend of watching wrestling with that show. Also, Saturday night's main event and Evolution. But yeah, AEW, they put on good pay-per-views. They have good matches on those pay-per-views. I'll never say otherwise. But yeah, I feel like they would probably be better pay-per-views and looked at better if they cut off at least 2, maybe 3 matches from them. But they probably won't listen to me about this subject, so I guess I'm talking for nothing. But who knows? Maybe they'll hear this clip and they'll actually start thinking about it. Anything can happen. All right, so guys, I think it's time we jump into our wrestling DeLorean. And this month, we are going to take you back to March of 1994 as I cover WrestleMania 10. This was a very special time for me as this was the year I actually started watching wrestling, WWE specifically. I wasn't watching it this time. I started watching WWE during the summer in the build to SummerSlam. But I remember renting this WrestleMania from the video store later that year and just being mesmerized from start to finish. This was the first really good WrestleMania that I watched from start to finish. And yeah, I just have a lot of good memories of this show, of this time frame. I know business wasn't good for WWE at the time. They were really going through a rough period. And also the steroid trial was coming up with Vince in a few months after this. But just as a fan, especially as an 8-year-old kid at the time, I just ate this all up. Like, I remember those times of like going to Blockbuster to rent the videos every weekend, watching the pay-per-views every month or every other month because they didn't run them every month at the time, and then begging my mom to let me stay up to watch Raw or at least stay up to watch like the opening match of Raw because it would start at my bedtime. Yeah, there was nothing like those early days of being a wrestling fan, like during that mid-90s period. Yeah, it was a great time. Always a time I look back on with the most fondness. And funny enough, this would be the very first WrestleMania to not have Hulk Hogan on it. As Hulk Hogan was the face and in many ways the godfather of WrestleMania for those first few ones, like those first 9, it was just really weird to not have Hulk Hogan on this show. But I will say, from how good this show turned out, they didn't really need him. Hell, they didn't need him at all. Because the problem with WrestleMania 9 was that he'd been gone for a year, and then he came back and stole Bret Hart's thunder. But this year, there was no Hulk Hogan to pull that bullshit. So in that sense, it was a relief that Hogan was not on the show. Because eventually, they were going to need to move on from Hogan. They were going to need to move on from that 80s era. And even though business suffered for it for a couple of years, there was something they were going to have to do at some point. So this was the right time for them to do that. But while pro wrestling and WWE specifically was not hot and really not popular in March of 1994, one thing that was popular was pop culture and music during this time. And the number one song that was bumping during this time of WrestleMania 10 was I Saw the Sign by Ace of Base. This song isn't really my cup of tea, but I could see why people liked it. I could see why it was a popular song. And yeah, that song was a big deal. And I know this person has become tainted in recent years because of his infatuation with little girls. But R. Kelly's Bump and Grind was also one of the biggest songs out during this time. And I know R. Kelly, it's weird with him. And me personally, I can't really listen to his music anymore because of what he did. But I will be honest, from a music quality standpoint, he was one of the best to ever do it. As far as R&B singers, R&B songwriters, he was second to none. And you could feel however you want to feel about him. And for the things he did, he definitely deserves to be punished for those things. He does not deserve a pass for it. But from a music standpoint and music quality standpoint, I can't deny the dude's talent. So yeah, Bump and Grind was hot during this time. Also, Regulate from Warren G and Nate Dogg was hot during this time, as Above the Rim was actually about to come out right after this WrestleMania. Yeah, that was a hot song and arguably one of the best songs to ever come from a movie. Yeah, that song was hot. Also, Nas's Ain't Hard to Tell came out, the first single off of Illmatic, which will come out the next month after this WrestleMania. And crazy to think, this is when Nas and Biggie and Outkast first came out, was this year, 1994. Yeah, Illmatic would drop the next month. Also, Southern Playalistic Cadillac Music would drop the next month. Yeah, there was a lot of great music and a lot of great things going on in the world of hip hop, R&B, and just music as a whole. You still had Snoop Dogg's Doggy Style bumping during this time. You also had Wu-Tang's 36 Chambers bumping during this time. Yeah, it was a great time to be a hip hop head, was that 94 period. Great time, great memories, great songs, little commercial bullshit. Yeah, in many ways, I miss it. So yeah, all those songs were hot, and also getting into some of the movies that were hot during this time. The number one movie, ironically enough, at the time of WrestleMania 10 was Naked Gun 33 and the Third, The Final Insult. And I gotta say, this is the Naked Gun movie I watched the most when I was a kid. This movie was hilarious. I like all three of them. Honestly, the Naked Gun is one of the best trilogies I've ever watched, but for whatever reason, the third one is the one I always watch the most. Obviously, Anna Nicole Smith was great in it. She was also nice to look at, but that's another story. Leslie Nielsen always killed it. Like, even if the third one may have not have been as strong as the first one or the second one, Leslie Nielsen always knew how to pull it off, and his comedic timing was second to none, and he could make anything good just by doing all that. And funny, this would be the last Naked Gun movie up until the most recent Naked Gun that came out last year with Liam Neeson. And that one was really funny too. I can't say it's better than the original ones, but I personally enjoyed it. I had a great time watching it in the theaters. I laughed my ass off. I think they like paid homage well to the original one. And yeah, the Naked Guns are some of the best comedies you'll ever watch. And that third one also, 33 and the Third, yeah, it's some funny shit. It's eerie kind of watching OJ Simpson in it because this is literally right before the whole murders would happen and the chase would happen and all that a few months later. So yeah, it is a little weird seeing him in the third one. So yeah, Naked Gun 33 and the Third out. Also D2 The Mighty Ducks. I know my podcast partner John Randall's a huge fan of this movie. That also came out right after this WrestleMania. Honestly, the best out of the whole series. I love the second Mighty Ducks. Just watched it a few weeks ago. That movie was a lot of fun. Also, Ace Ventura was still in the middle of its box office successful run during this time also. It just came out like the previous February, but it was still doing work at the box office during this time. And yeah, I'll never forget going to see that movie in the theaters, and I was just hooked on it from that point on. Yeah, so you had all those movies out at the time. It was still a really fun time to go to the movies. I also missed those days too. And the number one show during this time of WrestleMania 10 was, ironically enough, Home Improvement. I used to watch all those ABC sitcoms growing up, like Family Matters, Full House, Perfect Strangers, Who's the Boss, Boy Meets World, obviously, etc. But for whatever reason, I never got into Home Improvement. Home Improvement, I never really watched. Roseanne, at the time, I didn't watch. I've gone back to watch a couple episodes since then and enjoyed it. But yeah, Home Improvement, for as popular as that show was, I never really watched it. I don't know why. I watched Tim Allen movies. Like, obviously, I've seen him in Toy Story doing the voice of Buzz Lightyear. That's probably his biggest thing he's ever done in his career. I've seen a couple of his other, like, Disney movies like the Santa Claus. But yeah, Home Improvement, yeah, just never got into it. But I won't deny how big of a hit that show was and how popular it was during this time. And yeah, people went crazy for that damn show. Hell, even Pamela Anderson was on it during that time. Or in the earlier seasons, I should say, she was on it. Yeah, music, movies, pop culture, television. Yeah, it was just a different vibe back in 94. And with my crazy memory, I can still remember it very vividly. I remember a lot of those shows I used to watch every week, every Friday, specifically with TGIF, with the Boy Meets Worlds, the Family Matters, Step by Step. Also, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air was still on during this time in the middle of its fourth season. Yeah, you had a lot of great television and a lot of great entertainment out during this time. Also, Martin, Living Single. Yeah, all those great shows. Yeah, magical time, especially for black entertainment. I would say, yeah, that mid '90s period, especially, was the peak for black entertainment when it came to movies, when it came to television, and also when it came to music and hip hop and R&B specifically. But yeah, I don't want to waste too much time getting into that part of March of '94. Let's dive into what we mainly came to talk about today: WrestleMania 10. It took place on March 20th from Madison Square Garden in New York City. And it was fitting because the first WrestleMania took place at the Garden. So the 10th WrestleMania took place at the Garden. And they would follow that same trend with WrestleMania 20 10 years later. And unfortunately, since WrestleMania 20, they have not done another WrestleMania at the Garden since. But yes, we had WrestleMania 10. To open the show, we had Vince McMahon come out to introduce Little Richard, who would sing America the Beautiful to start the show. And returning to WWE to do commentary with Vince McMahon for this show was Jerry the King Lawler, who had been missing from WWE television since the fall because he got into some trouble because he was accused of hooking up with a 15-year-old girl in a hotel room. I don't know the full details of that, but he was eventually acquitted and the charges were dropped. So that's why he was back here at WrestleMania 10. And in the opening match of WrestleMania 10, we had the first time in the history of WrestleMania where we would see a brother versus a brother. And that match I'm talking about is Bret Hart versus Owen Hart. And funny enough, initially, Vince McMahon wanted Bruce Hart, Bret Hart's other brother, in this spot instead of Owen, but Bret Hart pitched hard for Owen to be in this spot because he felt like Owen would have been able to pull it off better, and honestly, Bret Hart was spot on. I couldn't see anybody else in this spot other than Owen because the performance he put on throughout this entire feud was gold. This was the feud, and this match specifically was what made Owen Hart a superstar. Because he'd always been a great wrestler. He'd always been a great hand, somebody great to have on the shows. But admittedly so, before this feud started, he was not considered a superstar. And the way this feud all began was at the Survivor Series the previous November when Bret, Owen, Keith, and Bruce Hart were on the same Survivor Series team. And at one point, Shawn Michaels pushes Owen Hart into Bret Hart and Bret falls off the apron. And that causes Owen Hart to be eliminated. And then after the match, Bret and the other brothers are celebrating because they won. And Owen, being the only brother eliminated, comes into the ring to confront Bret. He shoves him. He gets in his face. They get into this big argument. They have to be separated and all that. The mom's crying in the front row. And then Owen challenges Bret to a match. And then Bret rejects the challenge because he doesn't want to fight his brother. And then during the holidays, it seems like they squashed everything. They talked it out and everything's cool. And they're going to challenge the Quebecers for the tag team titles at the Royal Rumble. But when they get to the Royal Rumble for the match, Bret's knee gets injured during the match. He gets attacked. He gets beaten down. And then he's trying to make the tag to Owen, but he decides to stay in the match. I'm not sure why, but he decides to stay in the match. And it ultimately leads to the referee throwing out the match because Bret can't continue. And obviously, Owen is livid about this. He's heated about this. And then he ends up kicking Bret's leg out of his leg. That's right. After all that frustration, all those months of teasing it, Owen at the Royal Rumble turned on his brother. And yeah, it was a well-done angle. It needed to happen, and it set up this match for WrestleMania 10 perfectly. But funny enough, later that same night, Bret Hart would go on to co-win the Royal Rumble match along with Lex Luger, which we'll get into a little later. So Bret Hart had double duty at this WrestleMania as he would face his brother Owen in the opening match, and he would face the winner of the Yokozuna and Lex Luger title match in the main event for the title at the later part of the show. So we had the match between Bret and Owen. Yo, these two were gold together in the ring. Obviously, Bret has the advantage in the first few minutes. Owen tries to wrap his hands around his waist, but then Bret reverses it and leads him through the second rope out of the ring. And then ultimately, Owen regains the advantage with a sidekick, and he just takes it to Bret. He starts beating the hell out of him, puts him in the figure four. He pulls his hair. He's fighting dirty. He even hits him with a tombstone at one point. But then Bret eventually mounts a comeback, and then he jumps over the top rope onto Owen. But then when he jumps over the top rope onto Owen, he hurts his knee. And then Owen obviously takes advantage of this. He starts attacking Bret's knee. He starts hitting it against the post. He kicks it just like he did at the Royal Rumble. And then he puts him in a figure four, then later puts him in a sharpshooter until Bret's able to escape. And then Bret eventually makes another comeback. He hits Owen with a superplex from the top rope. And then he also traps him in the sharpshooter, but then Owen's able to escape. And then Owen sends Bret into the turnbuckle, and then Bret puts his feet up to kick Owen in the face. And then Bret tries to stand on top of Owen's shoulders. He gets on top of Owen's shoulders to do a roll-up, kind of like the one he did to Bam Bam Bigelow to win the King of the Ring. But Owen falls down on top of Bret to pin him for the 1, 2, 3, and Owen Hart beats his own brother at WrestleMania. Damn. And honestly, that is exactly the way the finish for this match needed to go. Because for this feud to really extend and go longer and to be a credible feud, Owen Hart had to win the first match. And winning this match made Owen Hart a star in a way he had never been a star before. And this feud would only get better and more intense and more juicier as the months went on. But yes, a star-making performance for Owen. Bret also obviously did his thing in this match too. But yeah, Owen definitely needed this win more than Bret did. And it's exactly the way it needed to go down with Owen winning. And yeah, not enough good things I could say about this match. Hands down, the best opening match in the history of WrestleMania. And even 32 years later, as many great opening matches we've had at WrestleMania since then, this one is still number one as far as I'm concerned. And I know many of you would agree with me too. And in our second match, like to forget this one, we had a mixed tag involving Doink and Dink the Clowns against Bam Bam Bigelow and his main squeeze, Luna Vachon. I got to admit, the Doink character was great as a villain, as a heel, when Matt Bourne played him. But this goofy kitty bullshit, Doink and Dink, I was not feeling this at all. And this was a prime example of how horrible and how dog shit WWE's mid-card gimmicks were in this time period. Holy shit, man. Like, I can imagine putting this on TV, like putting WWE on TV during this time to somebody who's never watched wrestling before, and they see Doink and Dink the Clowns. It's just one of those gimmicks, one of those things that, yeah, it kind of makes you shake your head and ask yourself sometimes, like, why the hell do I watch this shit? But in any event, we had the match. The match isn't really much to see. Obviously, you just have Doink and Bam Bam wrestle each other, and then Dink and Luna wrestle each other, which is also very weird. But ultimately, Bam Bam Bigelow and Luna Vachon picked up the win after Bam Bam hit Doink with a diving headbutt from the top rope. And that was that. Bam Bam and Luna pick up the win. And crazy how far up Bam Bam Bigelow would rise from this WrestleMania to WrestleMania the next year when he would be in the main event against Lawrence Taylor. But yeah, this was some dog shit match for him to be in on this WrestleMania. If you go back and watch the show, I don't recommend to watch this match. Yeah, that Doink and Dink gimmick from that time frame, the good guy Doink and Dink, this kitty bullshit. Yeah, this shit was for the birds. Yeah, this shit really was for the birds. And then after this, we go to the Skybox, and in the Skybox is a President Bill Clinton lookalike. We talked about this on our Survivor Series 95 Wrestling Review Rewind episode a couple months ago. They had a Bill Clinton lookalike there because it was in DC, obviously. But here at WrestleMania 10, this is the first time where they actually had the Bill Clinton lookalike. And yeah, it was pretty much every bit as ridiculous here as it was at Survivor Series 95. Because, yeah, WWE was really on some nonsense during the time, and this is one prime example of that. But in any event, I don't need to dive too deeply into that right now. Let's get on to our next match. And our first ever Falls Count Anywhere match in WWE history, we had Macho Man Randy Savage going one-on-one with Crush. And this was a far cry from the Crush that you saw at WrestleMania 9 with the blonde hair and the bright orange and yellow outfits, all that shit, the Kona Crush character. Yeah, this is definitely a far cry from that, as he was wearing darker colors and all that good stuff. Because the way this feud all started was the previous summer in 93, Macho Man talked Crush into challenging Yokozuna for the WWE Championship. Obviously, he did not win. But then after the match, Yokozuna hit Crush with multiple banzai drops, and Crush was off TV for the next few months, and when he came back with Mr. Fuji as his manager with a whole new look, and he blamed Macho Man for not coming in to help him sooner when he was being attacked by Yokozuna, and this led to this whole argument between them, and ultimately Crush attacked Savage and then picked him up and bench pressed him and then dropped him chin first onto the guard railing. So obviously this sparked a feud between the two of them that stretched out for the next few months after this, and this would be the culmination of all this. And Crush did that exact same thing to Macho Man at the start of this match. As Savage confronted Crush in the aisleway and attacked him, and then Crush got the better of him, and then Crush just bench pressed Savage and then dropped him chin first under the railing, kind of like how the feud first started. And then he got the first fall, got back into the ring, and then Savage had till the count of 10 to get back into the ring. I'm sorry, not a count of 10, I'm sorry. Savage had a count of 60. He had a whole minute to get back into the ring after getting pinned, and he eventually gets back in. Him and Crush fight some more, and then he lays Crush out with the diving elbow from the top rope, and then he pulls Crush out of the ring to pin him, and then Crush then has 60 seconds to get back into the ring, and then Mr. Fuji pours water on him, and then he gets back into the ring. The match continues, and then they fight into the fans. They fight into the back area, and then Savage gets Crush down again and pins him, and then he ties Crush's legs up with like some kind of cable. He ties him up and has him hanging upside down, and then Savage gets back into the ring, and then Crush obviously is unable to answer the count. So Macho Man Randy Savage wins the match, and funny enough, this would be Macho Man's last WrestleMania and last pay-per-view match for WWE, as he would end up in WCW by the end of the year. And I have to be honest, for his last WrestleMania match, this was a very weird one. Very, very weird one to say the least. I've seen some great Falls Count Anywhere matches before over the years, but this one was just strange. This one was weird with the whole pinning them outside the ring and then they have 60 seconds to get back in. Yeah, that whole thing was strange. Like if they just had the match as like a regular Falls Count Anywhere match where like it's one fall to a finish where they can pin anybody anywhere, I think it would have maybe worked a little better. But the way they designed it here, yeah, I don't think it really clicked. But it was what it was. Macho Man picks up the win. And in our next match for the WWE Women's Championship, we had Alundra Blaze defending her championship against the woman who defended the Women's Championship at the first WrestleMania in that same building, Leilani Kai. And funny enough, this is around the time they first revamped the women's division in WWE because they discontinued it a few years earlier. So when they brought it back, around this time, they made Alundra Blaze the first champion. So she came into this show defending her title against Leilani Kai. There wasn't really much to this match. It only went about 3 minutes. And ultimately, Alundra Blaze finished off Leilani Kai with a German suplex to get the win and retain her title. I mean, I know the women's division clearly wasn't a priority to them back then like it is now. And you could definitely tell by watching this show. But Alundra Blaze was a great performer. She was a great wrestler, and my early memories of watching wrestling during this time frame, I always was a fan of her work. But it's unfortunate she didn't get the recognition and also the respect that she deserved during that time. But it is what it is. She retained the title here. And in our next match, how the tag team division had fallen in WWE by this point. We had for the tag team championships, the Quebecers, with Johnny Polo, a.k.a. Raven, in their corner, defending their titles against Men on a Mission, Mabel and Mo, with their bright purple outfits, and Oscar as their manager, wrapping them to the ring. Also, another example of how dog shit the mid-card gimmicks in WWE were during this time, and also a prime example of how far the tag team division had fallen in WWE in the last 3 years or so. Because you look at those early WrestleManias, especially like WrestleMania 5, WrestleMania 6, and the tag team division is stacked. You have great tag teams for days on those WrestleManias. But here at WrestleMania 10, was just not the same vibe. And originally, it was supposed to be the Quebecers against the Steiner brothers for the titles here. But since the Steiner brothers wanted to work dates in New Japan in addition to also re-signing with WWE, Vince McMahon apparently took them off the show here, and they were gone from the company just a few months later. So Men on a Mission ended up getting this spot instead. And for the most part, this wasn't much of a match. The one impressive spot I will say from this match was the point of the match where the Quebecers double suplexed Mabel. That was an impressive spot. I'll give you that. But ultimately, besides that, there was no real point to this match other than the tag team titles being on the line. There was no real story, no feud really going on to really hype it up and get you that invested. And ultimately, Mabel splashed Pierre on the floor when Mo pushed him down, and that led to Pierre getting counted out. And Mabel and Mo won the match, but did not win the championship. But even though they did not win the championship, they celebrated like they won the championship. They were holding the belts up, jumping up and down, dancing. Oscar was rapping and all that. Yeah, some weird-ass championship celebration. Kind of reminded me of Lex Luger at SummerSlam 93. But yeah, they did not win the titles here, but they would win the titles during a European tour just a week or so after this. But the thing is that it wasn't really planned, and Mabel fell on top of Pierre, and Pierre couldn't get up. So they had to, call an audible and do the pin there. But the Quebecers won the titles back just a few days later, I should say. So yeah, the Quebecers, they lose the match, but they keep the titles here, and they would ultimately lose the titles for good about a month or so after this to the Head Shrinkers. And that was a much better match than this match was. I will say that much. The match the Quebecers had with the Head Shrinkers, where they eventually lost the titles, that was a good match. I'll admit that. But this, yeah, you're not missing anything if you don't watch this match. Hate to say it, but I have to be honest on this show, and yeah, this wasn't much to see. And in our first of two WWE Championship matches that would take place on this show, we had Yokozuna defending the WWE Championship that he had held for almost a year by this point against Lex Luger. And this is where we had all those guest celebrities come out to be guest ring announcer in Donnie Wahlberg's case, and also be guest timekeeper in Ronda Shear's case. And yeah, she was smitten with Burt Reynolds backstage earlier in the show. Burt Reynolds was like sweet talking her and all that, and she was getting wet, all that good stuff. But yeah, we don't need to dive into all that. But yes, there was also a special guest referee assigned for this match, and that guest referee for this match would be none other than Mr. Perfect. Mr. Perfect had not been seen on WWE television since the fall when he went down with a back injury, so he was coming back here. And the Yokozuna and Lex Luger feud all started the previous summer on July 4th when Luger body slammed Yokozuna, and that led to the whole Lex Express thing that would carry into SummerSlam where they would face each other for the championship. And while Lex Luger did win the match, he won the match by countout and did not win the championship, but still celebrated like he won the championship. I don't know why, but he looked like a damn fool doing it. So then his only chance at getting another title shot, because Jim Cornette put it in the contract that he would not get another title shot after that one, was to win the Royal Rumble. So it came down to Lex Luger and Bret Hart in the Royal Rumble match, but then the two of them fell out of the ring and over the top rope to the floor at the exact same time. So they ended up being co-winners of the Royal Rumble, and they flipped a coin to decide who would get the title shot first against Yokozuna at WrestleMania. So Lex Luger won the coin toss, and he got the first shot at Yokozuna, and the winner of this match would face Bret Hart at the end of the show. Yeah, there were a lot of rest holds in this match. Yokozuna was working on Lex Luger's neck. He had his thumb pressed against his neck for a healthy majority of this match. And ultimately, Lex Luger made a comeback, and then he slammed Yokozuna again, and then he knocked him out with the metal-plated arm, with a flying forearm, and then he has Yokozuna pinned, has Yokozuna down for the count. But because Lex Luger attacked Mr. Fuji and Jim Cornette and pulled them into the ring when he attacked them, Mr. Perfect is occupied with trying to get them out of the ring, but then Lex Luger tries to get his attention again to show that he's going to pin Yokozuna. But oddly enough, Mr. Perfect tries to get the managers out of the ring again. And then Lex Luger's getting pissed, and then he gets in Mr. Perfect's face and he shoves him. And then he tries to pin Yokozuna again, and then Mr. Perfect realizes that Lex Luger just put his hands on him. So Mr. Perfect calls for the bell, leaves the ring, and as a result of a DQ, Yokozuna keeps his championship. And obviously, Lex Luger was livid at this outcome and livid at this decision, so he went backstage to confront Mr. Perfect. The two of them get into this big-ass argument to the point where they have to be separated by officials and by Todd Pettengill. It's a whole mess. It's a whole big thing. And this is ultimately supposed to lead to the two of them feuding after WrestleMania 10. They were even supposed to wrestle each other at the next Madison Square Garden house show that would happen a few months after this, but Mr. Perfect's back problem started coming up again, and he was taken out of this whole storyline and replaced with Crush. And this match, unfortunately, would be the end of the Lex Luger main event push. For almost a year, they tried to really make him the new Hulk Hogan. They tried to make him the new face of the company, but it just didn't work. He was just too much of a carbon copy of Hulk Hogan with the physique, the hair, and the red, white, and blue American Spirit bullshit. Yeah, it was just too much of the same old shit that people had already seen, and they wanted something different. They wanted something new, and the Lex Luger presentation at that time just was not offering that to them. So by this point, it looked like Vince McMahon had pretty much given up on that, and we'll get into what direction they moved into later in the show. But yes, Yokozuna retained the title, and he would face Bret Hart in the main event later in the show. And then next up, we had a match between Earthquake and Adam Bomb. But before the match, Harvey Whittleman, who was Adam Bomb's manager, was being introduced by Howard Finkel, who was rocking a toupee on his head because of that Cy Sperling dude, the hair clip for men guy. So yeah, Howard Finkel's rocking a toupee, and then Harvey Whippleman is talking shit to him like he usually did back then, but he takes it a little too far this time. He like really starts laying into Howard Finkel, calling him stupid, calling him ugly, talking shit about his suit. Then he rips off a piece of his suit, and then Howard Finkel, taking none of that shit, shoved Harvey Whippleman down on his ass. Good for him. Good for him. Stood up for himself. And then Adam Bomb comes out to confront Howard Finkel, gets in his face, and then Earthquake comes out to attack Adam Bomb from behind. And then Earthquake just hits him with a belly-to-belly suplex, not a sidewalk slam, power slam, and then he hits him with the Earthquake splash, and that's all she wrote. Earthquake defeats Adam Bomb in not even 1 minute. Yeah, this was what it was. Funny enough, Earthquake wouldn't be in the company that much longer. Earthquake would actually leave the company after doing a sumo match with Yokozuna a few months after this on Raw. He would head to WCW with Hulk Hogan and all his other friends. But yeah, this was basically a squash match if I'd ever seen one. And yeah, that was that. Earthquake picked up the win. Initially, it was supposed to be Ludwig Borga in this spot instead of Adam Bomb, but he was injured during this time and also had a bad attitude backstage. So obviously, he was replaced by Adam Bomb. And yeah, we would never see Ludwig Borga in WWE ever again. Not like he was missed, but is what it is. He was gone around this time. And if you watch this Dark Side of the Ring episode from last season, you'll understand exactly why I'm saying these things I'm saying. But yeah, Earthquake picked up the win here. And in one of the matches this show is most remembered for, we had the first time ever at a WrestleMania, a ladder match to decide who would be the undisputed Intercontinental Champion, as we had Razor Ramon going one-on-one with Shawn Michaels. And the way this storyline all started was back the previous year, in the fall of '93, Shawn Michaels was stripped of the Intercontinental Championship and suspended. And while he was out serving his suspension, he refused to give them the title back because he felt like he was wrongfully suspended for something he did not do. So he refused to give them back the championship. So they had Razor Ramon win another version of the championship while Shawn Michaels was gone. And when Shawn Michaels came back, he had that version of the Intercontinental title he had originally. So they were both going around talking about how they were the real champion, they were the true champion. So to finally settle this, they put both belts above the ring for one of them to climb the ladder and grab it. And I gotta say, perfect storyline to put this match together. Say what you want about a lot of the gimmicks and the way business was for WWE during this time frame, but this storyline and also the Bret and Owen storyline were gold. The best things they had on the entire product during that time. So we have Shawn Michaels come out with Diesel, and you also have Razor Ramon come out all dripped in gold, and he actually walks underneath the ladder. I guess he's a fearless man, but we have the match. And in the first few minutes, Diesel attacks Razor Ramon outside the ring. And when the referee sees this, he's angry and he's pissed, and he kicks Diesel's ass out of ringside. So now it's just one-on-one, and then the ladder comes into the play after the first few minutes as Shawn Michaels baseball slides the ladder into Razor Ramon's ribs, and then he has the advantage over Razor for the first few minutes. He starts like hitting him in the back with the ladder. Yeah, just punishing Razor with the ladder, and he even jumps off the ladder and hits Razor with a splash. That's one of the top 10 highlight reels of WrestleMania moments. Like if you were to put together like the main WrestleMania moments that have taken place over the years, that would be one of them, along with the Edge spear on a Jeff Hardy hanging from the belts from 17, and obviously the Hogan body slam to Andre from WrestleMania 3. You could also throw that into that mix too. So Shawn has the advantage, and then he's about to climb the ladder and retrieve the belts, but then Razor pushes the ladder and Shawn falls off of it onto the ropes. So Razor regains the advantage. He throws Shawn into the ladder and he falls over the top rope, and then he takes the ladder and hits Shawn Michaels in the chin with it, and he falls over the top rope again. And then he tries to climb the ladder up again. There's one point where they're both climbing up the ladder at the same time and hitting each other. And then Razor slams Shawn off of the ladder, and then he falls off himself. And then Shawn eventually regains the advantage and starts punishing Razor with the ladder some more. And even like goes on the top rope and drops the ladder onto Razor as he falls down with it. And then he sets the ladder up like in between Razor Ramon, so like Razor Ramon can watch him climb the ladder and get the belts. But then Razor Ramon gets back up, and then he runs into the ladder. And then as he runs into the ladder, Shawn falls off of it. But then when Shawn falls off of it, his leg gets trapped into the ropes. So he's like struggling. He's trying hard to get out of it. He's trying hard to escape. And then Razor grabs the ladder, climbs the ladder, and then Shawn escapes his leg. But the problem is when he escapes his leg, his arm gets trapped into the rope. So he's trying as hard as he can to like get out of the ropes and catch Razor in time, but it is too late. Razor Ramon climbs the ladder, grabs both belts, falls down onto the mat, and is now the undisputed Intercontinental Champion. And I kid you not, one of the loudest pops you will ever hear at Madison Square Garden or any show, period. That pop Razor gets when he grabs the belts and falls down, it's priceless. Yeah, one of the loudest pops, one of the loudest ovations I've probably ever heard in my entire time of watching wrestling. That shit was gold. And yeah, it just took me back to how much of a fan I was of Razor Ramon when I first started watching wrestling back in '94. He was definitely one of the people I gravitated towards the most. It's really sad that he's not here anymore. I know the anniversary of his death was just a couple days ago. And yeah, just a lot of great memories of watching him. Also, Bret, Shawn, all these other guys during this period. And yeah, one of my favorite moments being a fan was watching him win this match. And then when he climbs the ladders, holds up both belts. Yeah, that was by far the best moment of his career, at least WWE wise. Yeah, not enough great things I could say about this match. Definitely a classic. Definitely one of the best matches in WrestleMania history. One of the best ladder matches, obviously, of all time. I know in many ways it's been kind of topped since then, but just something about this match, especially considering the time frame that it happened, it was just special. Yeah, nobody was putting on matches like this back in 1994. And for the two of them to put on the match that they did here, yeah, it was definitely something special. And as great as Shawn Michaels was in this match, and even though Shawn Michaels went on to have the better career overall, I always felt that Razor Ramon never really got enough credit for his performance in this match. And yeah, I think he was every bit as good as Shawn was here. And in many ways, I make the argument, I think at this point, he was a bigger star than Shawn Michaels was during this time. But in any event, Razor Ramon is the undisputed Intercontinental Champion, but his reign would be short-lived from this, as he would go on to lose the title to Diesel the following month. And they would end up feuding throughout the rest of the year, with Shawn involved too, among other people. But because this match ran for so long, and Razor Ramon and Shawn Michaels ignored their time cues and just kept the match going longer, a scheduled 10-man tag was cut from the show, pitting 1-2-3 Kid, Bob Holly, Tatanka, and the Smoking Guns against IRS, Rick Martel, Jeff Jarrett, and the Head Shrinkers. That match would take place on Raw a couple weeks later, but yeah, it's unfortunate that their match got cut and they didn't get a WrestleMania payday. But honestly, from the great match we got between Razor and Shawn, I can't really complain. I would much rather watch that match and have that match go longer than, honestly, that 10-man tag. But it is what it is. And on to the main event. For the WWE Championship, we had Yokozuna defending the title against Bret the Hitman Hart, the man he defeated for that championship at WrestleMania the year before, only to have it stolen from him from Hulk Hogan just a few minutes later, but we don't have to dive too deeply into that right now. So they would face each other here in the main event of WrestleMania 10. And just like the earlier championship match, this match would also have a special guest referee. And that special guest referee would be none other than Roddy Piper. And obviously, Roddy Piper and Bret Hart had history from WrestleMania 8, where Bret Hart beat him for the IC title. And I know some people during this time said that they thought Hulk Hogan was going to be the referee in this spot. But with Piper being the referee in this spot instead, a lot of them were relieved. And I would say it was the best move because they needed to move on from Hogan. It was going to have to happen sooner or later, but yeah, by this point, they needed to move on from Hogan. And Hogan, in many ways, needed to move on from them too, as Hogan would show up in WCW not too long after this. And yeah, Piper was the referee, and also we had the celebrity guests for this match too, including Jenny Garth from 90210, who apparently was not very friendly and not very engaging with anybody during her time at WrestleMania 10. And also Burt Reynolds. Burt Reynolds was the guest ring announcer. He introduced Roddy Piper. They had a nice hug. And his hand was taped up for some reason. Yeah, for some reason his hand was taped up. But because apparently some dudes tried to rob him. Like not too long before this show, some dudes tried to rob him in LA. They tried to attack him, but then he fought back. And then when he realized who they were, they ran away. But in any event, so we have the match. Obviously, both men are tired because they both wrestled a match earlier in the show, especially Bret with that long, drawn-out match with Owen. That was incredible. So Bret came to the ring limping, and then Yokozuna attacked him before the match started. They have the match. Yoko has the advantage for most of it. And then Bret eventually knocks Yokozuna down and tries to pin Yokozuna. But as Piper's making the count, Jim Cornette pulls him out of the ring, and then Piper just smacks him in the face. And honestly, good. Cornette had no business interfering in this damn match, and he had no business wearing that damn wacky-ass outfit he was wearing, so good on Piper for smacking him for that. So anyway, the match goes on. Bret eventually mounts another comeback where he's clotheslining Yokozuna from the second rope, hits him with the elbow from the second rope that he does, and as he tries to jump onto Yokozuna again, Yokozuna catches him and hits him with a sidewalk slam, and then Yokozuna pulls him to the side of the ring to do the banzai drop, but as Yokozuna's about to hit it, he loses his balance, falls off the second rope onto the mat, and then Bret Hart proceeds to hook his leg and get the 1, the 2, the 3 to a huge, gigantic pop from the crowd, and Bret the Hitman Hart wins the WWE Championship for the second time. And it was great when he won the title the first time. It was a little shocking and out of nowhere, but it was still great when he won it the first time. But this was the way you needed to crown Bret Hart. The main event of WrestleMania in Madison Square Garden, this was the point that Bret Hart was anointed as the main guy in WWE and as the face of their new generation era that they would run with for the next few years. Just as a fan of Bret specifically, I will say this is my favorite title win of his, and honestly, this is one of my favorite WWE title wins, period. I was so ecstatic. I was so happy that he won this match. I mean, the finish could have been maybe done a little differently, but regardless of all that, I'm just happy that he won. And then Piper puts the belt on his waist and then gets chased away by Yokozuna. So then Bret Hart gets up, he holds up the title, and then Lex Luger comes into the ring. Him and Lex Luger have a brief face-off, obviously because Lex Luger lost to Yokozuna earlier. He would have every right to be upset. But then Lex Luger and Bret Hart shake hands and they hug. Lex Luger raises his hand, and then Roddy Piper comes back into the ring to raise Bret's hand. And Razor Ramon comes in, Tatanka, Sparky Plug, Burt Reynolds, Donnie Wahlberg, all the celebrities come in too, Gorilla Monsoon, even Vince McMahon, everybody and their mothers in the ring celebrating with Bret. Macho Man comes in, celebrates with Bret also. So yeah, it's a huge celebration. You definitely can tell by this celebration and by this post-match that this is the beginning of a new era, that things are going to be different, and that Bret Hart is going to be the face of all that. And honestly, there was nobody more deserving at that point in time than Bret Hart was, especially after how he was treated the year before with the WrestleMania 9 finish and Hulk Hogan not wanting to drop the title to him. This, in many ways, this ending to WrestleMania 10 kind of felt like an apology from WWE for all that stuff that happened. And one hell of an apology it made out to be, because damn, this is one of the best endings to a WrestleMania I've ever seen. Yeah, this shit was great. And the icing on the cake to all this was Bret's brother Owen, who he defeated earlier in the show, showing up in the aisleway, and you could read him saying the words, "What about me?" Yeah, so Owen staring at Bret, super jealous, super upset, because he beat Bret earlier in the show, had that great match where he beat him, and at the end of WrestleMania, it's all about Bret. Bret's the champion, everyone's celebrating with Bret, everyone's talking about Bret, but nobody's talking about Owen. So obviously this was the perfect way to keep their feud going, as Owen had beat Bret earlier in the night, and now Bret's the champion, and Owen comes out super jealous that Bret's the champion. So this is the perfect way to show that their feud was going to continue. And boy, did it continue beyond this point, because they had that great match at SummerSlam, the cage match where Jim Neidhart, British Bulldog, and everybody else got involved, and they would just feud all throughout the rest of that entire year. And yeah, honestly, I'm happy that was my first real introduction to wrestling, was that feud between Bret and Owen, because I have an older brother. We would fight a lot, especially during that time. And yeah, that feud with Bret and Owen was very relatable. And crazy considering that Vince McMahon didn't want to do that feud at first because he thought that brothers feuding was not realistic. Damn, tell me you're out of touch without telling me that you're out of touch. But in any event, the show ends with Bret Hart standing on the second rope with the WWE title around his waist, and the show fades into black. And yes, that was WrestleMania 10. I know parts of that show haven't aged well. I mean, certain parts of the show you could really skip, to be honest with you. But for me personally, it's still one of my favorite WrestleManias. Just from the Bret and Owen opening match, the Razor and Sean ladder match, to Brett winning the title at the end and the celebration afterwards. Those are the three main things that put this WrestleMania over the top. So if I would have to rate this WrestleMania by 2026 standards, I would give it 7 out of 10. Admittedly, there's been better WrestleMania since then, but I know a lot of people have said this, and I agree with it too. This was the best WrestleMania from top to bottom up until that point. Because a lot of those early WrestleManias, they dragged, they had a lot of filler bullshit. And not that this WrestleMania didn't have filler bullshit too, but this one was just different where the filler bullshit didn't overstay its welcome and the good shit really stood out. And yeah, the good shit really stood out in this show. It was in many ways the best that WWE had to offer at the time. And yeah, I know 1994 wasn't the best of times for them business-wise or creatively, but the good things about this show that stood out the most were enough reasons to watch the show during that 1994 period. So yeah, that was WrestleMania 10. Unfortunately, my podcast partner couldn't be here to talk about this show with me. It would have been great to have him on, but it is what it is. Hopefully he'll be back on the show by the time we get closer to WrestleMania. Hopefully by the week of WrestleMania, he'll be back. But until then, you guys are stuck with me. So yes, follow us on our social media pages, our Facebook, our Instagram. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Subscribe to our Spotify, Spreaker, all that good stuff. We would love to debate with you guys and talk with you guys about these topics in a healthy way. Keyword healthy way. So yes, guys, until next time, this is Conscious Kurt with another edition of Clash of Champions. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Remember, don't be an asshole and a douchebag in real life or social media, because that toxic bullshit is for the birds. Peace.